Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. CES 2021 has been highly anticipated, with Intel's Rocket Lake being announced, AMD announcing a litany of products including finally Cezanne, and Nvidia with their mobile products as well as the expected RTX 3060 amongst other things. So the purpose of this video is to cherry pick the most interesting announcements and to kind of go over them. And we'll be going through each company alphabetically just because I figure it's the fairest way to do it. With that said, most of this video is going to be audio only because there's going to be a ton of different conferences, slides and stuff to go through. But with that said, let's start things out with AMD. AMD were always going to focus rather heavily on mobile, given the announcement of Cezanne, and I think that they nailed it, honestly. The 5800U is a Zen 3 based 8-core 16-thread CPU with a boost frequency of up to 4.4 gigahertz and has a TDP, a base TDP, of as little as just 10 watts, which is, in my opinion, absolutely just crazy, honestly. The results that AMD have provided of the 5800U also just really speak for themselves. There is no competition here between what AMD are offering and Intel's x86 11th generation processors. They are absolutely just stomping them in pretty much every single benchmark. But things get worse when you take into account the gaming side of the equation as well. AMD are actually introducing the HX series of CPUs, which again, of course, are based on Zen 3. The difference here is that the clock frequencies are greatly increased, and well, the big change really is that the TDP as well is raised, but this also allows them to overclock the processors as well. That's right, you are fully able to go in and tweak the processor and do pretty much whatever you want. Intel do have overclockable CPUs for laptops as well, but this is definitely a quite large shift in direction for AMD. And yeah, the 5980HX is still 8 cores, 16 threads, but boosts up to 4.8 gigahertz, which is, well, honestly, pretty damn amazing. Furthermore, it does have a TDP of 45 watts, but again, it is rather overclockable. On the mobile side of things, AMD are really just hitting out of the ballpark at the moment. I think it's fair to say that they are going to become a tour de force in mobile, well, even more so, with the battery life just absolutely ridiculous. We're talking about a battery when you're doing kind of everyday tasks such as web browsing and whatever that lasts basically all day. We're approaching 24 hours of battery life when you're watching video, and that honestly is just that honestly is just crazy to me. That's just, well, yeah, I can't really say anything else. That's just pretty damn nuts. As for announcements for kind of more hardcore gamers, unfortunately there wasn't a huge amount. We did see a tease for mid-range RDNA 2 based GPUs. Lisa is actually stating that they will be released in the first half of 2021, although she did not provide an actual release date. But there was an image which did flash up for a few moments when the release date was mentioned, and that actually did show a single fan design of an RX, I'm going to call it the 6700 until we actually have official names. But yeah, this particular GPU could be the 6700 or it could be a lower power design. What she basically said though is that they will be trickling those GPUs out over the coming months. Furthermore, there will be RDNA 2 based GPUs for the laptops as well. So of course, that is going to be a pretty big shift for AMD because of the power efficiency of RDNA 2, and it's going to be very interesting to see how AMD can create an ecosystem based around RDNA 2 discrete GPUs on the for, of course, mobile, as well as with their Cezanne APUs. The only other thing of note is that AMD also teased Milan. They provided a benchmark here where they were just ruffle stomping Intel, and the worst part is they were not even showing the 64 core variants. They were showing literally just a processor with half the number of processor cores, and even so, yeah, it was just absolutely just stop, it's already dead kind of levels of performance with Milan. And I I feel that AMD are just for the short term anyway going to be unstoppable in the data center just because of the core count advantage that they have over Intel, and this was something that they continue to really push verbally throughout, was the number of cores that were available, threads and cores, threads and cores, threads and cores. As for the overall conference, my opinion of it was that I felt it was over padded. I felt that they probably could have cut the length of it by 50%. I felt that they were just kind of talking and talking and talking with some of the guests that they had on, and no disrespect to them. But I felt that if they'd cut it by 50% and maybe kind of tightened up the conference, it would have probably been a bit better from a gamer's perspective. But there were some really cool announcements. I found the Cezanne announcements particularly interesting, but furthermore, of course, yeah, Epic just continues to dominate and show that AMD are just. I think in the short term anyway, Intel are going to have some major trouble. And speaking of Intel, what did Intel actually show off? Well, they did preview both Rocket Lake as well as Alder Lake, which I think is kind of interesting. But we'll stick first of all to Rocket Lake. There was actually no release date or prices here, unfortunately, for Rocket Lake. But they did confirm a plethora of things. First of all, it's 8 cores, 16 threads, up to 5.3 gigahertz for single core, and all-core up to 4.8. It supports 3200 megahertz memory, although it's worth noting that overclocking, we've already seen the memory go up to 6666 megahertz and 6.9 gigahertz, although of course that's not exactly with stock cooling, that is with liquid nitrogen, but even so, it's very impressive that the memory can go up to this type of speeds. They also have a new GPU, of course, and there are up to 20 CPU PCIe 4 lanes, which is going to be very important, of course, not really for GPUs in the short term, but for the new standards of SSD which are coming in. And this allows both the SSD as well as a discrete GPU to directly connect to the CPU, of course, using these 20 lanes. They also reaffirmed the fact that it is going to be compatible on the 400 series chipset, as well as, of course, you've got forwards compatibility if you happen to have a Comet Lake processor and you want to plonk it into a into a 500 series board. But yeah, overall, Rocket Lake is looking decent. They also provided a couple of benchmarks as well, and ultimately they compared it against a 5900X in gaming. They showed Metro, and well, yeah, they were slightly ahead, about 4%. Unfortunately, of course, that's not exactly a wide range of applications that Intel was showing. There have been some less official leaks for Rocket Lake, but for this video I want to keep everything as official as possible for Rocket Lake, and I want to make another video of how Intel can compete in the future, in the not too distant future, if that makes any sense. But furthermore, they also did tease Alder Lake, which is, well, just bizarre, but we are living in bizarre times. They did demo the 12th generation processors, again, Alder Lake, and as you're likely aware at this point, they are hybrid technology, so they comprise both big and small cores under the same essential package. They've confirmed it will be utilizing 10nm. They are calling it the Enhanced 10nm Super Thin Architecture. It rolls off the tongue or something. It is a very early engineering sample CPU, and they've basically shown that it is running on a stock cooler, but it's also running PCIe Gen 5 as well as DDR5. So this is, I suppose, really the first demo we've seen of this type of configuration, certainly from Intel. No performance metrics really at all. All we know is that it's running and it's not bursting into flames. As for the release date of Alder Lake, that's where things get a bit sketchy, because some folks are actually stating that it's going to launch by the end of the year, which may mean that Rocket Lake has a comparatively short shelf life. It could only have a shelf life of like 9 months before Alder Lake is given birth to. Then again, it's also possible that it's pushed until early next year, but who the hell knows? There were also some bits and pieces shown off for Intel's Xeon scalable processors based upon Ice Lake, but there's not a huge amount here to say. I don't want to talk too much about Ice Lake because I know many of you are not for servers, because I know many of you are not exactly server admins, and we've still got a ton of stuff to get through with Nvidia in a moment. The only other thing of note was Intel's Tiger Lake processors. Intel are doubling down on the fact that they are great for power consumption as well as performance. They run up to 5 gigahertz. Again, same number of PCIe Gen 4 lanes, so 20 total, which naturally will be very important when you're considering that these are going to be best paired with, a discrete GPU or something like that. Unfortunately, yeah, there was nothing from Intel graphics, which I'm not surprised, but I'm somewhat disappointed with. And obviously, these processors will actually replace Comet Lake H. So, yeah, this is probably going to be taking place by, kind of the end of the first half of this year. So May, June, possibly July, depending on how the chips. I'm sorry, that was terrible. But these will also be equipped with 8 cores, 16 threads as well. So that's pretty cool. Unfortunately, we just don't know yet how, of course, they're going to compare against Cezanne. So we'll have to wait for them to actually be released so we can actually do some benchmarking. And finally, Nvidia, which I think their conference was about the best out of all the CESs. I think Intel just didn't have enough to show, honestly. I think Rocket Lake was kind of cool, but there were so many details missing of the Rocket Lake announcement, like little things, really. Release date being one of them. And AMD's conference just had so much padding. I think while the announcements of those companies was cool, but Nvidia's at least was kind of short and got relatively to the point. The RTX 3060 was the big announcement from Nvidia, and it is, of course, powered by GA106. And this card actually is looking to be quite monstrous. It's not going to be available until, quote, late February 2021, and it's going to cost you the princely sum of 329 US dollars, which is pretty much the same pricing actually as the RTX 2060 when it launched. So I don't think that's too bad. The specifications are now confirmed, so we are looking at 3,584 CUDA cores, which is not too shabby. And yeah, I mean, you can see the specs yourself. 13 shader T-flops, 25 RT T-flops, and finally 101, can't forget that one, tensor T-flops. It's outfitted with 12 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory. I'll get to that in just a moment. And of course, that's on a 192-bit bus. Nvidia have also provided us some slides and kind of comparisons of how well it performs. And according to them, it's going to basically be the ultimate kind of 1080p esports card. And obviously you will be able to play games such as Cyberpunk with RT and DLSS on. That is naturally at 1080p. You won't be able to crank this to like 4K or something like that. But again, for the price point we're looking at just 329, I don't think that's too bad, honestly. So, what about that GDDR6 memory? Well, I reached out to Nvidia and asked them about that, and apparently the official kind of wording is that they felt that 6 gigabytes for a card of this size just wasn't, well, enough. And so they kind of feel like in, modern days, they wanted to go with 12 gigabytes, which I understand, but there's no comment yet as to what we're going to see in terms of tweaks to the desktop lineup, or if we're going to see cards released with more VRAM on the desktop, obviously. I was also asking about resizable bar because this was actually confirmed by Nvidia for their mobile GPUs, but I'm going to throw this in here as well. So I asked Nvidia about this, and I was told that resizable bar will be provided support with GeForce products in, quote, late February, and this is going to be when the RTX 3060 launches, and then other products will be supported later on. So this is going to be kind of February, March is when Nvidia are going to start supporting resizable bar. As for Nvidia's mobile products, well, they showed off the RTX 3060, 3080, and finally 3070. I'm not quite sure why I went through those in that order, but there we go. And yeah, the weirdness of Nvidia's VRAM thing doesn't really stop here. The RTX 3080 is monstrous. We've tackled the specs of this several times before, but it's kind of close to the RTX 3070 for desktop. It features 6144 CUDA cores, There's 5120 for the 3070, and finally the 3060 has 3840, and the GPUs are also outfitted with 256-bit bus for the 3080 and 3070, whereas the RTX 3060 has 192-bit. With the RTX 3060, we're looking at 6 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, and then both the RTX 3070 and RTX 3080, these are kind of the cards which are designed for higher performance, and those cards are actually outfitted with 8 or 16 gigabytes of memory. The performance of these cards is looking to be kind of crazy. It was actually they actually put a slide in showing the RTX 3060 is, quote, 30% faster, or 1.3 times faster than the PlayStation 5, which also means, of course, it's more powerful than the Xbox Series X. And these laptops are going to be available, for around the $1,000 mark, although, of course, it will depend upon the vendor, with the RTX 3080s being considerably more expensive. The interesting thing about these laptops is that they also have high resolution screens too. So I think it's fair to say that there has been definitely an absence of 1440p displays on laptops. And I'm quite happy that this is starting to change, because 4K displays for a laptop is a bit like, really? Don't know about that. It kind of seems like those pixels are going to waste. And 1080p? Yeah, on larger screen laptops, yeah. So I think 1440p in that respect is a sweet spot. Again, I totally get that everyone has different opinions here. Another really cool thing Nvidia showed off was Dynamic Boost 2.0. And this is actually utilizing AI. So basically, on a frame-by-frame basis, not only can the CPU and GPU adjust in terms of clock frequency, but furthermore, the GPU's memory even can clock up and down too. I'm ultra excited to see what AMD bring to the table with RDNA 2 for mobile, because it's fair to say that Nvidia are just hitting it out the park with the RTX 30 series, but given the scalability and energy efficiency of RDNA 2, I feel that they can do an excellent job in competing with Nvidia. So it's going to be very interesting to me in terms of the ecosystem and how all of this plays out. For example, what are we going to see with Cezanne-based APUs and AMD RDNA 2 based GPUs, and how's that going to play out with Nvidia GPUs? And I'm really excited on the mobile side of things. As for desktop, I think that the RTX 3060 is tremendous. I think it's going to be a really good card. I'm really sad that we don't get to see the RX 6700. I'm actually really interested to see how much AMD end up charging for that. Unfortunately, Lisa didn't mention anything about the supply constraints that obviously the industry is facing at the moment. Interestingly, Nvidia mentioned it very briefly. All they basically said is that they're aware of the frustrations of people and that they are trying their darndest to kind of work around that and to improve supply. But, well, yeah, I don't necessarily know if those words are going to bring a ton of comfort to many people. I must say that the last 12 months have just been absolutely strange in technology. Um, Even over the Christmas period, there was no slowdown in news, which is just bizarre and unusual. But coming into CES 2021, I think that there was a lot of expectation and hype going into it. Unfortunately, with the last 12 months being mired in a ton of difficulties for people, not least of which the shortages of hardware, it's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. I'm really happy that cards such as the RTX 3060 are actually starting to come out to store shelves. At the MSRP that we're seeing here, it's actually a pretty darn decent price, at least in my opinion. And obviously, more cards available to the mainstream is only ever a good thing. But the problem is, it's always with that asterisk, availability. One big piece of disappointing news for me is that there was nothing really from Intel Graphics. I'd really hoped that we'd get a tease, something of their discrete GPUs, and it makes me wonder what date we're actually going to see Intel jump in to the gaming market, at least for desktop. But either way, it's been an interesting 12 months to say the least, and I suspect that it's not going to change any. Intel's Rocket Lake, I will remain on the fence with until we actually get to test the product. But I think for gamers, it could be an interesting product if we can see the availability and pricing really hit the point that we hope for. And to me, the really weird thing is we already are seeing an Alder Lake tease from Intel, which is kind of weird. Like it would be the equivalent of AMD teasing Zen 4 or whatever as Zen 3 was being announced. It's almost like, hey, we've got this, but we've also got this. Just kind of really pushing the fact that they're trying to step up the speed of their introduction of different products. Also, on the subject of Intel, they're even considering going to a different manufacturer for silicon, and they've recently announced that they will actually make an announcement. So I guess it's an announcement of what their decision is regarding if they are going to use either Samsung or TSMC for certain chip production. Of course, Intel are using those fabs already to produce certain silicon, and we know the info regarding the discrete GPUs on not using Intel in-house processors. But yeah, whether that comes to the fray or not, I don't know, but obviously given their earnings call is going to be fairly soon, which is when the announcement is going to take place, I figure we might as well wait for that to kind of really delve into it. If they do choose to, it's going to be just kind of crazy. I don't suspect that they're going to just abandon their own, fabs for obvious reasons, but it would lead to some rather interesting questions to how things are going to happen, because you would assume anyway that if, just for the sake of argument, they went with TSMC for, let's say, 5nm, that they would want some type of commitment to that fab. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how that plays out. But with that said, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. If you did, then of course you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel and definitely click the bell icon because, well, YouTube land and all of that jazz. But for now, I'm going to let you all go. Thanks very much for checking out the video. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.